All right, get ready to dive in, everyone, because today we're exploring the world of aquariums.
Oh, I love aquariums.
Me too! But we're not just talking about visiting them.
We're going deeper.
Much deeper. We're going to unpack what it actually takes to build these underwater worlds.
Oh, from scratch.
From blueprint to a thriving ecosystem.
Wow, that's ambitious.
Right. It's way more complex than I ever realized.
Well, most people probably just see the finished product, right? The fish, the coral.
Exactly. They don't realize how much planning goes on behind the scenes.
And the expertise.
It's not just about filling a tank with water and dumping some fish in.
No, not at all.
Mm-hmm.
Our source today really stressed that these are meticulously planned ecosystems.
They called them a fusion of art and science, which I thought was interesting.
Because it is. You're trying to recreate a delicate balance, just like in nature.
And it starts with understanding the needs of each and every species.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Our source gave the example of fish that live in rocky reefs.
Versus those that prefer the open ocean.
Right, you can't just put them together and hope for the best.
It's like designing a city with different neighborhoods, each suited for a certain lifestyle.
Exactly. You need to consider their feeding habits, their social structures, everything.
It's incredible. So they've got these blueprints for underwater neighborhoods.
But then comes the actual construction, which is a whole other challenge.
Because it's not like building a house, right? It's more like a giant watertight puzzle.
With much higher stakes.
Right, because we're talking about enormous tanks.
Millions of gallons of water.
And immense pressure.
Yeah, the engineering that goes into these tanks is mind-blowing.
Our source was talking about how they use these incredibly thick panes of glass.
Sometimes several inches thick, just to withstand the pressure.
Wow, I never even thought about that.
It's like building a skyscraper, but instead of going up, it's holding all that weight inward.
So how do they even make those giant pieces of glass stick together?
That's where things get really tricky.
Because even the tiniest leak could be disastrous.
Absolutely. Our source mentioned these specialized adhesives and sealants that they use.
So it's not just your average aquarium silicone from the hardware store?
No way. This stuff is designed to withstand decades of constant pressure and salt water.
Wow, that's intense.
It's a highly skilled process, bonding those panels together.
It makes you appreciate those underwater tunnels even more, knowing how much engineering went into them.
It's like walking through a liquid building, really.
Okay, so they've got these super strong tanks, but what about the water itself?
Ah, yes. Water chemistry, the unsung hero of the aquarium world.
It can't be as easy as just filling it up from the tap, can it? So we've talked about building these massive tanks, but what about the water itself? It's not like they just fill them up with a garden hose, right?
Not even close. Think of it this way. An aquarium is basically a closed-loop system, right?
Okay, like a mini ocean.
Exactly. And just like the ocean, the water chemistry has to be just right to support life.
Which is way more complex than I ever imagined.
Our source made a point that really stuck with me. They said, just like we need air to breathe, fish need clean, oxygen-rich water.
Makes sense, but easy to forget when you're looking at a tank.
Right. But it's not just about oxygen either. Salinity is another huge factor.
Salinity, that's just the saltiness, yeah.
Yep. And even slight variations from what those fish are used to can cause them stress.
Oh, interesting. So it's like if our bodies get too hot or too cold, things start to go wrong.
Exactly. Fish are super sensitive to the balance of their environment.
So how do they even measure all that? Do they have like underwater weather stations?
You're not far off. They have all sorts of high-tech monitoring equipment.
To make sure the water's just right.
Constantly. Because it's not a static thing either.
What do you mean?
Well, think about it. Fish eat. They produce waste.
Oh, right. It's not like you can just flush a giant toilet.
Exactly. So those waste products, things like ammonia and nitrates, they build up in the water.
And that's bad, right?
Very bad. In the ocean, there's this whole natural cycle that breaks that stuff down.
So how do they recreate that in a tank?
That's where the magic of filtration comes in.
The giant filters you see behind the scenes?
Those are a part of it, for sure. It's a multi-stage process.
Okay, so walk me through it.
So first, you have mechanical filtration.
To get rid of the big stuff.
Exactly. Like uneaten food, fish waste, any debris that's floating around.
Oh, okay, that makes sense, but I'm guessing there's more to it.
There is. Next up, you've got biological filtration. This is where it gets really cool.
How so?
Remember how I mentioned the natural cycle that breaks down waste in the ocean?
Yeah.
Well, they actually cultivate beneficial bacteria in the filters to do the same thing.
No way. So they're basically farming good bacteria to eat the bad stuff.
You got it. It's like a tiny microscopic ecosystem working hard to keep the water clean.
That's wild. So they've got the tank, the filtration, the perfect water chemistry. Is that it? Can they finally add the fish?
You make it sound so easy. But you're right, that's the next big step. But even that's not as simple as just dumping them in.
So we've got this pristine, perfectly balanced underwater world. Time to add the stars of the show, right?
You make it sound like we just roll out the red carpet.
Well, I was picturing something a bit more splashing.
Our source made it clear that introducing marine life is a carefully orchestrated process.
More like a slow symphony than a rock concert, then.
Exactly. And it starts with quarantine.
Which always sounds a bit ominous. Why the need for solitary confinement before the big move?
It's all about protecting the health of the whole community. New arrivals need to be checked for any signs of disease, parasites.
So it's like a checkup at the doctor's office.
Exactly. But for fish. And they need time to acclimate to the new water parameters.
Temperature, salinity, all that jazz.
About minimizing their stress, making sure they're comfortable.
Okay, that makes sense. So after quarantine, it's party time. Everyone gets dumped in the tank for a giant underwater mixer?
Not quite. Remember, we're dealing with different species, each with their own needs and behaviors.
Right. Some fish are naturally more assertive.
Our source used the term territorial.
Which is a nice way of saying they don't like to share their space.
Exactly. And you don't want to put a naturally aggressive species in with, say, a school of docile fish.
That would be like putting a shark in a goldfish bowl.
Well, not quite that extreme. But you get the idea.
So how do they figure out who's compatible with whom? It sounds like a recipe for underwater drama.
It takes a lot of careful observation and planning. Our source mentioned that aquariums spend a lot of time studying fish behavior.
Both in the wild and in controlled environments, right?
Exactly. They need to understand things like feeding habits, territoriality, even if one species might see another as a potential snack.
It's a jungle out there. Or should I say a reef?
And once they have a good understanding of the social dynamics, they can start to design the exhibit accordingly.
Using rock formations, plants, almost like interior design for fish.
You got it. It's about creating a space that's both visually appealing to us and a healthy environment for them.
That's incredible. So much thought goes into every detail of these exhibits.
It really does. And, it makes me think,
It's about.
if it takes this much effort to create a thriving ecosystem in a controlled environment, imagine the complexity of our oceans.
And the importance of protecting them.
Exactly.
It's a good reminder that we're all connected to these amazing underwater worlds.
We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of aquariums.
And that next time you visit one, you'll appreciate all the hard work and ingenuity that goes on behind the glass.
It's truly a blend of art and science, all working together to create a window into the ocean's wonders.
Until next time.